In this video, I'm going to walk you through creating a beautifully, aesthetically pleasing image gallery, just like this one, or this one, using CSS Grid. So CSS Grid is really the new standard for implementing layouts on the front end in your HTML and CSS design. So I thought it'd be really cool to walk through implementing Grid for something that we all enjoy looking at, images. Cool. So this is ultimately what we will be building, and we can see that there are what looks like, rows, right, and columns of content, and Grid does a really good job of breaking this down into those rows and columns. And if I just went to developer tools here, and I'm in Firefox, you can actually see where those rows and columns start and end. Okay, so I've used this particular CSS Grid design and made sure that the images were placed within those particular row and column blocks. Okay, so that's what we're kind of aiming for to achieve. What we're starting off with is this. This contains all of those images that we just saw. And oof, this is one of my favorite. And we're going to take it from this and ultimately turn it into that. Okay, so let's get started. A few of the things that I want to just kind of go over are the actual HTML of the design, because that's going to be important where we apply Grid. You can see here that I have a container, and this container has an element inside, a gallery, and the gallery has all of the images. I'm using the figure HTML5 tag to contain the individual image elements, which contain a link to that particular element. Okay, the figure tag, just in case you're unaware of the figure tag, I don't use it quite often, but it is an HTML5 element. So I just pulled it up ahead of time. W3 schools love the site, always go here to get a really terse description or some information about a specific thing. In this regard, it's just the HTML figure tag, and it's really an element to mark up a photo or element. It was, I'm just trying to come down here, it was new in HTML5, okay? So you won't see it in previous versions, but you're not even writing in previous versions anymore. Everything you do is in HTML5 anyway, okay? So that's the tag. Also, the images themselves, these particular images, this image is coming from a site called Unsplash, and this one here is coming from a site called Pexels. So this is the Pexels site, and you can go here and find some really, really cool, captivating images, right? And any, oh look, this is pretty cool. I didn't realize they had videos. Beautiful images, and all you got to do is right click and copy the image, save image as, copy image, I think here, or copy image location, and you'll have the image. And then the other site is Unsplash, which I kind of go to more often than Pexels. And same thing here, just beautiful pictures. Oh, look at this dog, that's amazing. And once again, you just right click and I could copy the image location here, and then I'd have the URL to the image, right? Okay, so you're never at a loss to find images. I'm gonna just get rid of these. We don't need these anymore. And oh, hold on one second. I lost the pen, so I'm just gonna open it up real quickly. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Here we go. Starter code. Grid. Let me search. Here we go. All right. My bad. All right. We're back in action right here. Okay. The only other thing that I want to point out is something that I'm actually going to be really focusing in on in the upcoming front-end web development course that I'm going to be teaching at General Assembly in New York on February 24th. So if you're interested, go to the General Assembly site and take a look. I'll be teaching the class. One of the things that I want to point out here is the naming context of the class names here. What you'll see is the name here. Just let's start with gallery, and then underneath each fig has a gallery underscore item, and then a gallery underscore item dash one. This type of CSS style comes from something called BEM. It's the BEM style, and it's block, elements, and modifiers. And when we do that, really what we're doing is, towards the bottom of this site, is it? No, I think on the naming page, they show you that it's really a block and an element, and then its modifier. So the block is kind of a standalone thing, and an element would be something specific within that block, and then the modifier would be something we're using to modify that element amongst other elements within the same block. Okay, so I'm just going to be using that BEM writing style here. All right, so let's get rocking. And the first thing that we're going to want to do here is what do I want to do? Okay, I'm missing one thing here that I want to add. I'm going to add the body, and for the body I'm going to give it a height, and I'm going to say a height of I don't know, 100 vertical height. Let's see, does that change anything? Nope, nothing happens. The body is still well, we didn't see anything happen, so if I actually put a border of 1 pixel solid, maybe we'll see something. There we go. See how the body is the vertical height of the window? That's what VH really stands for, vertical height. And so it stops right here. Here's the vertical height. The images are large, so they're going to keep going. If I change this to be 100%, let's see, well then it doesn't even go anywhere. Yeah, I don't even, oh, you know what? I don't have the semicolon there. That's why. It also does go, but it goes a little further, right? So it goes a little further, and there will be a difference between the percent here and vertical height once we start adding in the images themselves, okay? So let's leave, I'll leave the border there for now, and I'm gonna go to the container, and I'm also gonna give it maybe a border of 1 pixel solid as well. And we're not really going to see anything unless I get rid of this. Let me get rid of this border here, and let's take a look. All right, so where's, oh, nope, I don't have any border, right? Or do I? I think the border is around the images. The images contain the border. So if I get rid of this, you'll actually see the border should have, oh, interesting. Okay, well, let's leave it for now anyway. Border, I'm going to say width is going to be 80%. Okay, so I'm going to make the container 80% width. I want to center the width, so I am going to say margin 0 auto. That's how you usually center it. And then I'm going to give it a height. You know, I'm going to go up here. I always try to keep the width and the heights together. Height of, I don't know, 100%. And that should be it. I'm really curious where the border is. So I'm going to say border 5 pixels solid. Let me see if I make it red. Do we have anything here? I don't see the container. Really interesting. I don't see the container. I'm going to make sure that the container is there. The container is there. Really wild. I don't see the container. Okay. Even if I did 10 pixels solid, border red, nothing. Whew. Crazy cool. All right. I know it's there. And if I knew I would do body, we should get the body back. So don't really see. Maybe it's behind these images. Not really sure. Okay. Well, it'll show its face any second. So I'm just going to leave it as 1 pixel solid red, and we'll see it. Once it comes back, we'll change it. Okay. So let's take a look here. In order to really apply grid, I'm going to go to this grid specific section. So according to our design or our HTML layout thus far, we have gallery. Gallery is going to contain all of the images, and it's the individual figures that I'm going to be placing within the grid. So if I go back here to the grid, each one of these individual figure HTML elements is going to be placed within one of these rows and columns. Okay, so I need to define that in grid, the rows and columns. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is kind of make a decision on, I don't know, like how many rows or columns. So let's say we want 5 rows and 4 columns, right? That's what we're aiming for. Now, to turn grid on, we have to do display grid, and that should turn grid on, but you don't really see anything happening just yet, or did we? Huh, you know what? I'm gonna get rid of this, and let's take a look. Real quick, what happens? So there is, something does happen. You see the space here between these two elements? I'll even go here between this one. Turning it on does something. Does a really short, boop, does something really, really quick. Gets rid of those spaces, okay? So, we know that grid is working. So now I have to create, I'm going to do grid, template columns. And with grid template columns, I'm going to say how many columns I want. Now we wanted what, 4 columns? So I am going to use the repeat keyword because I want to create 4 columns that are 1 fractional unit in length. Okay, FR is a new sizing element used in grid, and you're going to see it quite often. We could have used percentages too, so you know I could have, just for the sake of argument, I could have said 25%. Didn't really change anything. Okay, so percentages and fractional units could at times be used interchangeably, but fractional units are more in line with grid and do compensate for other things grid specific that percent wouldn't be necessarily aware of. Okay, so we have fractional units, and what grid is trying to do right now is it's taking all of the images, and there's a column here, right? So these are 4 columns, and it's going through the images one at a time and sticking them into each particular column. Okay, and by doing so, the images themselves are kind of feeding into the scope of their size, and then the next row will take the next 4 images and try to cram them into their own row of columns, and then the last image also is being placed there. So grid can be intuitive. That's pretty crazy, but grid is smart to a degree, and we can at times use that to our advantage. So now that I have the columns, I'm going to do the grid template rows, okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say, oh, repeat, did I misspell it? Oh, I did. Template rows, and I'm going to repeat, and say the same thing. This time 5, and I'm going to do 1 FR and end it, and okay, cool. So what we can see here is that now it's trying to use all of the space. See how it's trying to use all the space, all the images look the same height, and it's trying to compensate and once again use its intuitive grid magic to place the images where they need to be placed. I do want to create some space between the images. You know, I want to create this kind of space. See this little space between here. Let me get rid of this grid display, and I want to create this little gap right there between the images. I like this space. I don't like when they're touching. It's kind of aesthetically unpleasing. So I'm going to say grid gap, and I'm just going to say 5 pixels. Let's get 5 pixels, and nice. Now we have the grid spacing. Awesome. Cool. All right, there are some additional styling that we're going to apply to the gallery. And for the gallery, I am going to give it a, let's see, let's give it a height of, I don't know, 100%. Let's see what that gets us. All right. Oh, look, nice. We get a little bit more height here. I'm going to say padding 20 pixels so we can, oh, because there's no 2. Right, so padding. So I can get some space in between here. I don't want to touch it, but I always like to have the borders there so that I can clearly see where things begin and end. Okay, so that's nice. And then what's the next thing I'm going to do? I could do the border too. So let me try, I don't know, border 1 pixel solid. And do I have a border? Yeah. So the border on this is overlaying the border on something else too, right? Border, 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 border. Looks like it doubled up the border. So if I get rid of this border, we see that now. So I think that border was the grid, 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 body, 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 box sizing. Yeah, I think, not really sure. Let me see if I get rid of the container. See anything? Okay, so I wonder where I have the border set again. Not really sure. We'll just leave this border anyway. For now, double down on it. Okay, cool. So let's get cooking here, and we're gonna work with the gallery items themselves, the individual, all the gallery items at once, and we're going to say the height of each one is 100%. Okay. So once again, nothing really happens, okay? Nothing's really changing here at the moment. Let's go to the individual gallery items because now this is truly where the magic of CSS Grid happens. So now that I've defined the rows and columns, I need to assign each element to a specific row and a specific column. So I'm gonna do grid, column, and I'm gonna say, this thing starts on the first and it goes to the second line, okay? And then over here, we're gonna say grid row starts on the first and goes to the second row. So let's take a look. All right, so nothing's happening there. I'm actually gonna take a look and analyze my CSS. I feel like, no, there's nothing wrong here. Okay, clear format. Let me just format my CSS. All right. Let me go back. So we didn't really see anything happen there. I'm actually going to do this. I kind of want to take a look and see what's happening in the developer tools. Right, so I am going to inspect one of these elements. Didn't really look like it saved it, so let me save it. I'm not seeing it take effect here. So obviously we should see it. Now it's taking effect. Awesome, awesome. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go to the gallery. I'm gonna put the grid over it. And there we go. Awesome. So we do see that the grid is being applied, that these images are indeed being aligned, okay? So it is doing what I wanted it to do. Okay. So now in order to get our images the way we want, I am going to, if we go back to what it should look like, now these two images are the same height and width visually, and the third image is much larger. So the third image, if I do the overlay, is going to start from the third line, line 3, and go to line 5, okay, as it pertains to rows, and for columns, I'm sorry, as it pertains to columns, and for rows, it's going to go from line 1 to line 3, okay, and we're going to fill this block up. I don't need to actually assign this because once again, grid is just going to use the available space there and it will make the decision on what to do with it. So I'm going to jump to grid item 3, and here I'm going to say grid column, and we're going to say start at line 3 and go to line 5, okay, and then we are going to say grid row, start at line 1 and go to line 3, and let's see what happens. Nothing's happening. So I actually think something's broken here. because it, oh, there we go. We just needed to refresh. Damn, thought it would refresh on its own. Okay. So now we have this, and this image right where it needs to be. Okay, now I'm gonna go here, we'll refresh this page, right? All right, so this looks pretty good. If I do the git div, what we want now is for this image to span, let's go back and see, we want this image to span row 2, column 2, start at column 1, go to column 3, start at row 2, and go to row 4, or line 2 and go to line 4. That's what we want. All right, so let's go back. We'll make that change, and we're making that change to next element here, which is 4. That's what we want. And for 4, we're going to say grid column, and the grid column starts at line 1, goes to line 3. Right, we're going to span those two. Oh, it already does it. And then we're going to force it back up a little bit, and we're going to say grid row, go from 2 to 4 only. Okay, and then it pulls it back. Okay, so those fractional units are really dictating the available space, and we're saying keep it within that particular space. Okay, awesome. So we still have a few more. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at our image here. So it looks like the next image that we would work on is, I suppose, this butterfly, right? That's the next one in the sequence, right? And so according to this, the butterfly is located just below this. And the best part about grid is we can tell things where they need to be within the grid. So it's pretty cool because we can go to image 5 and say, all right, so the grid column, right, gotta spell it right, is going to be 1 to 3, right? So we're going to span this dimension here, okay? And then the grid row is going to be 4 to 6, and that should place it right there. It's gently placed in there. If we go here, it's there now. If we overlay the grid, we'll see 4 to 6, right? So what's crazy amazing about grid is that we can place anything, anywhere, and we don't necessarily need to force it like we would have needed to do with like using position absolute, which still has a place in design, but grid is supplanting some of that functionality. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the next image here, which is image 6. And let's take a look here. I'm going to say grid column. And this one is going to be columns 3 to 4. And did I spell it right? No, grid. Oh, I keep doing this. Grid, and then grid row. And for the grid row, we're going to say 3 to 4. 3 to 4, and let's see what we got. No real change, which tells me this is the image that we're targeting. We didn't really even need to target it. It's one of those, like 2, we didn't need to do. So I am going to, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to try to comment this out, and let's see if we didn't touch it and we went to image 7, could we just tell 7 where to be, and image 6 would just naturally stay in its place. So let's do grid column here for image 7, and I'm going to go 3, 4. That's where we want it to go. All right, so it moved image 7, which was that image. It's moved it to column to line 3 to 4, and this should be, right? Let me go back here. It should be 4 to 5. That should be its row. So let's do grid row and say 4 to 5, and boom, puts it nicely where it needs to be, and then moves the other bird image up, right? So it did put it there, and the bird image right here is same row, but same column, but row 5 and 6, right? All right, so this bird needs to be moved, and that would be image 8. And so once again, grid column, right? We're doing 3 and 4 because that's the column that we want the bird to be in. but we only want it to take up grid row, right? We want it to be what, 5 and 6? And so now it only takes up that space. Now, the reason why this kind of expanded itself is because this image is also just as large. And so because of that, Grid is just trying to compensate and say, well, you know, this thing is pretty much this size, so I'm going to take that image and make it the size of all the other images as well, except for this big one. So we're going to fix this one. And so for this one, we're going to say grid column. And the grid column is, oh, you know what? Look, I had this stuff down here too. That's why it wasn't taking effect. Container was down here. Oh man, this whole time. I had the grid container down here when the grid container was up here. Okay, never mind. And 9. So what are we going to do here? We are going to tell it to be column 4 and 5, which is where it is right now, but we want to tell it its grid row to be 3 going all the way down to 6. Boom, that's nice. All right, so now the image takes the full width. There's some other image specific elements here. So this image here, I feel like the images, this probably should have been somewhere up here. I should probably, because I did have gallery image up here. So I feel like this would be better suited. I'm going to remove it and I'm going to put it up here. Now, what you're seeing is like, whoa, what just happened, right? Okay, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to paste and we're going to kind of go through the actual image itself. Okay, so what happens here is I'm going to get rid of first the width and the height. Let's take a look. So the images need to also be told what dimensions they should fit within the scope of their boxes. So by telling it a width and height, we're telling it whatever box you're in, you can be 100% of the width and the height of that particular box. So the images are quite large and they would bleed outside. They're larger than this actual container, but we can tell the image to kind of stay within those dimensions. The other two settings here, object fits, I'm going to get rid of those and let's see what happens. Not a lot happens. We did see a subtle shift here. I'm going to put them back. All right. And so let's go. I'm going to get rid of the object position. I'm not really sure. Do we need that? We don't even really need object position. It didn't really do anything. So I'm going to get rid of this. An object fit allows us to try and fit the image into the available space and like get as much of the image as possible. So if we don't do object fit, you see that the full image, this one is probably the clearest because it does have a skyline to the image. And if we say, hey, try to cover the available space and give the best dimensions for the image possible within that space, well, that's what happens here. So once again, if I undo it, no. If I undo it, we could see that a few of the images did change. And if we do it, we can see that a few more change. There's object fit for cover. There's also one called contain. And contain is going to force the image to be within a certain ratio. It's going to try to keep the image in all its dimensions, the whole image, trying to show the whole thing within that particular space without losing or warping out the image. So a lot of the times I don't use contain, but just know that it's there. A lot of the times I use covers so that it kind of fits the available space, even though it cuts things off. You can always reposition these things. Cool. Now, I'm going to try to get back this container. Let me see. Did the container come back? Is its body there? We don't really see it. Yeah, the body's there because this particular border now is overlaid. So if I get rid of that, we'll see there is a red body now. We could see if I made this 5 pixels. I guess it was always there. We just didn't see it. So I make it red, right? So we could see it. We could see it there. That's our container. And so there you have it. So just to recap, creating a image gallery using CSS Grid requires, one, that you really think about your design also, your layout. Okay, although you can force elements anywhere on the page within the grid layout, there still should be some structure here to how you organized your HTML. Okay, what I start seeing now is like students just putting together element after element after element without organizing the content into some sort of structured layout, and then just forcing things to be where they want them to be. Or once again, that's not the intent of grid, but more so to place relevant content that is already structured into specific space on the page. Okay, so you can see we have a gallery, and this makes sense. Put the images within a gallery, right? Instead of just having the images free floating and forcing them in. So the other thing that we covered here that was really important to grid was turning grid on, right? Making a decision on how many rows and columns you want, and then defining those rows and defining those particular columns, as well as the grid gap too. So we can create that gap of space. So if I pull it out nice, it does. It looks really nice. It's trying to keep its dimension. See how the image gallery does, because of the available space, the available image, it is, I would say, a little bit semi-responsive, right? If we go smaller, we can see that it reaches a certain height in the row, and it kind of stays consistent. And then once we move back, it kind of changes. Okay, and that's kind of the image working its magic too. So we have the grid gap. We can change that if we want more space. We can put 10 pixels. We can create as much space as we want. And so grid columns and grid rows allow us to create that particular space. Now, I did mention, like, if I use maybe 25%, would that have changed anything? It did change it. See how it pushed out the image, right? So this, I believe, is happening because of the grid gap. If I remove the grid gap, does it put it? Yeah. So what happens is percent doesn't see or take into account this grid gap, which is something that the FR unit does take into consideration. The FR unit says, oh, is there a grid gap? Cool, we got to take that into consideration, subtract that from the available space, and then we will assign the available space that is left, and we'll divide that evenly into 4 separate columns. Okay, so a lot of times you are going to go with fractional units for these types of things. Awesome. Well, cool. I hope you go on to make some amazing CSS image galleries. And if you do, reach out. Maybe add it to the comments in the video below, and it'd be cool to see what everyone is capable of doing.